The silence in courtroom 4B was so heavy you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Roman Sterling stood tall, adjusting his $3,000 silk tie, looking at his wife Kane with eyes full of pity and contempt. His lawyer had just delivered the killing blow, a motion to dismiss her claim for half the company assets, stating clearly that Kane Sterling was nothing more than a domestic partner who had contributed zero labor to the Sterling architecture empire. The press in the back row scribbled furiously. It was over. Or so Roman thought. He didn't see Kane's hand trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of holding the ace card. He didn't know that for 15 years she hadn't just been his wife. She had been his ghost. And the judge was about to see the one thing Roman forgot to delete her signature. The divorce of the decade that was what the New York Chronicle was calling it. But inside the expansive mahogany-walled study of Judge Harrison's courtroom, it felt less like a media spectacle and more like a public execution. Kane Sterling sat at the defendant's table, her posture rigid. She wore a simple charcoal suit bought off the rack at a department store 3 days ago. It was a stark contrast to the bespoke Italian wool suit worn by her husband, Roman Sterling, sitting 10 feet away. Roman looked every inch the visionary architect. The world knew him as Silver Fox hair, perfectly coiffed, a jawline that had graced the cover of Forbes and Architectural Digest, and an air of relaxed confidence that suggested this legal proceeding was merely a scheduling conflict he had to endure. "Your Honor," Roman's lawyer, a shark named Silas Thorne, boomed. Thorne was the kind of attorney who cost more per hour than most people made in a month. He paced the floor, gesturing theatrically toward Kane. "We are not disputing that Mrs. Sterling was a supportive spouse. She hosted excellent dinner parties. She raised their dachshund. She kept the house warm. But let us be realistic. We are discussing the division of Sterling and Associates, a firm responsible for the Skyline Tower in Chicago and the Helix Bridge in London." Thorne paused for effect, leaning his hands on the defense table, smiling smarmily at Kane. To suggest that Mrs. Sterling deserves a 50% share of a multi-billion-dollar architectural firm is not just greedy. It is delusional. The plaintiff has no degree in architecture. She has no license. According to tax records for the last 15 years, her occupation is listed as homemaker. She has never clocked a single hour. She has never signed a single blueprint. She has never worked. The word hung in the air. Never. In the gallery, whispers rippled through the onlookers. Kane kept her eyes forward, staring at the great seal of the state hanging behind the judge. She felt the burning gaze of Roman on the side of her face. She knew exactly what he was thinking. He was remembering the nights she fell asleep at the drafting table while he was out networking. He was remembering the awards ceremonies where he accepted trophies for designs she had sketched on napkins while he drove. "She's a gold digger," someone whispered loudly from the back. Roman didn't correct them. In fact, he looked almost bored. He checked his watch. He had a lunch meeting at the Ritz in an hour. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Harrison said, peering over his spectacles, "you are asserting that the prenuptial agreement stands because Mrs. Sterling contributed nothing to the growth of the business assets." "Precisely, Your Honor," Thorne smirked. "The prenup states that unless the spouse contributes substantial intellectual or physical labor to the firm, they are entitled only to a fixed settlement. Kane Sterling has never worked a day in her life. We have the payroll records to prove it. Her name appears on 0 documents." Kane's lawyer, a quiet, disheveled woman named Amelia Vance, finally stood up. Amelia didn't look like a shark. She looked like a librarian who had been pushed too far. She shuffled a stack of papers, her hands shaking slightly. "Your Honor," Amelia said, her voice soft but clear. "We contest the assertion that Mrs. Sterling never worked. In fact, we intend to prove that Mr. Sterling hasn't designed a building by himself since 2009. Roman let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, loud enough for the mic to catch. "She doesn't even know how to use CAD software." Amelia ignored him. "We request permission to present evidence labeled Exhibit A through Z." "Denied," Thorne interrupted. "This is a waste of the court's time. They are trying to drag out proceedings to force a settlement." "I will allow it," Judge Harrison said, banging his gavel. "But make it quick, Ms. Vance. I won't have my courtroom turned into a circus." Kane finally turned to look at Roman. For the first time all morning, their eyes locked. She saw the arrogance, the absolute certainty that he had won. He winked at her, a cold, soulless wink. "He really thinks I'm stupid," Kane thought. "He thinks I'm just the girl he picked up at the coffee shop all those years ago." But Roman had forgotten one crucial detail about the woman he married. Kane wasn't just an artist. She was obsessively detailed. And while Roman was busy building his reputation, Kane had been busy building an insurance policy. She reached under the table and touched the cold metal of a USB drive in her pocket. The golden cage was about to break open. To understand why the courtroom gasped that day, you have to go back 15 years. You have to go back to a cramped, drafty apartment in Seattle where the air always smelled of rain and stale coffee. Kane was 22 then. She was a dropout, not because she wasn't smart, but because her parents had died in a car crash, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a younger brother to care for. She worked 2 jobs, a barista by day and a freelance graphic designer by night. She had a gift for geometry, for seeing the lines in the world that others missed. She saw structure where others saw chaos. Roman Sterling was 26, handsome, charismatic, and drowning. He had just started his own firm with a loan from his father, but he was failing. Roman was a brilliant talker. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. But when it came to the actual work, the math, the physics, the load-bearing calculations, he was mediocre at best. They met when he came into her coffee shop, looking like a man on the edge of a breakdown. He had spread blueprints all over a sticky table, his head in his hands. "Rough day?" Kane had asked, pouring him a refill. "I'm going to lose my first big contract." Roman groaned, not even looking up. "The structural integrity on the atrium is off. The cantilever won't hold. If I don't fix this by tomorrow morning, I'm done." Kane glanced at the blue sheets. She shouldn't have looked. It wasn't her business. But her eyes traced the lines of the steel beams, and immediately she saw the flaw. It was a simple miscalculation in the distribution of weight near the central pillar. "You need to move the load-bearing truss 3 meters to the left," she said casually, wiping down the counter. "And switch the material to a composite alloy. It'll lighten the roof tension." Roman looked up, blinking. "Excuse me. The truss," she pointed with a wet rag. "It's too heavy for that angle. Move it left." Roman stared at her, then looked back at the paper. He pulled out his calculator. He punched in the numbers. Then he stopped. He looked at the calculator, then back at the barista. "How did you know that I read a lot?" She shrugged. That night, Roman didn't leave the coffee shop until closing. He bought her dinner. He told her about his dreams of changing the skyline. He told her she was a genius. He made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. 6 months later, they were married. At first, it was romantic. They were partners against the world. Roman was the face, the salesman, the front man. Cain was the secret weapon. She didn't mind staying in the shadows. In fact, she preferred it. She was shy, anxious in crowds, and terrified of public speaking. Roman loved the spotlight. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. Every night, Roman would bring home problem files. And every night while he slept, Cain would sit at the drafting table in their living room. She fixed the math. She redesigned the facades. She turned his clunky, impossible concepts into soaring, elegant realities. When Sterling Architecture won the bid for the Metro Art Museum in 2012, Roman accepted the award. In his speech, he thanked his beautiful wife for her patience. He didn't mention that she had drawn the entire schematic for the ventilation system that won them the sustainability grant. Cain stood in the audience, clapping until her hands hurt. She was proud. She felt like they were building this life together. But the dynamic began to shift in subtle, poisonous ways. "Cain, darling," Roman said one evening in 2014. He was looking at a set of drawings she had just finished for a luxury hotel in Dubai. "These are brilliant, but maybe don't tell the guys at the office you helped. You know how the industry is. They won't respect me if they think my wife is doing the heavy lifting." "I understand," Cain said. She loved him. She wanted him to be respected. "It's better this way." He kissed her forehead. "You're my muse. You inspire me. That's your role." By 2018, the requests became demands. Roman would come home angry, tossing files onto the kitchen island. "Fix this. The junior architects are idiots. I need this done by 6 a.m. "Roman." "I'm tired," Cain had said once. She had been up for 2 nights nursing a flu, yet he still expected the work. "Can't you do it?" His face had darkened. "Do it, Cain. I run the company. I deal with the clients. I bring in the money that pays for this house, your clothes, your car. The least you can do is help with the paperwork." Paperwork. That's what he called her designs. Paperwork. He started locking her out of the decision-making. He stopped asking for her opinion and started giving orders. He hired a team of young, hungry architects, but whenever they got stuck, he'd bring the files home to Cain. He would present the solutions the next day as his own strokes of genius. The staff at Sterling & Associates whispered about Roman's incredible midnight epiphanies. They marveled at how he could solve complex structural problems overnight. Cain became a ghost in her own home. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't a partner. She was a resource, a battery that Roman drained to power his ego. And then came the discovery. It was a Tuesday. Cain was cleaning Roman's home office, something the maid wasn't allowed to do because of confidentiality. She knocked a stack of papers off his desk. As she gathered them up, she saw a printed email chain. It was between Roman and a divorce attorney. The date was 6 months prior. Subject: Asset Protection. From Silas Thorne to Roman Sterling. "Roman, if you want to leave her, we need to ensure the IP intellectual property is locked down. Make sure her name isn't on anything. Not a single email, not a single login. If she can't prove she worked, she gets the statutory minimum. Keep her happy, keep her quiet, and keep her off the payroll until the Skyline project is finished." Then we cut her loose. Cain sat on the floor, the paper trembling in her hand. The Skyline project, the massive 100-story tower that was set to be the tallest in the hemisphere. She had just spent the last 3 months calculating the wind resistance spiraling for that tower. She had poured her soul into it. He wasn't just using her. He was planning to discard her the moment he had what he needed. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood up, walked to the computer, and logged in. Roman thought she was just a homemaker who was good at math. He forgot that to design modern skyscrapers, you had to be a master of coding and digital architecture. She opened the CAD file for the Skyline project. "You want to erase me, Roman?" she whispered to the empty room. "Let's see you try." She opened the command line of the design software. She began to type. She wasn't deleting anything. That would be too obvious. Instead, she was adding something. A layer. A digital fingerprint deep within the geometry of the building itself. It was the beginning of the end for Roman Sterling. He just didn't know it yet. The months following Kane's discovery of the email were a masterclass in deception. To the outside world, the Sterlings were the power couple of the architectural scene. Roman was featured in Vanity Fair, posing in front of the sleek glass model of the Skyline Tower. The caption read, "The visionary who tamed the wind." Inside the mansion, however, the air was toxic. Roman had stopped pretending. He barely spoke to Kane, treating her more like a roommate he was eager to evict than a wife of 15 years. "The wind shears are still too high on the upper deck," Roman snapped one Tuesday evening in November. He threw his tablet onto the sofa where Kane was reading. "The simulation keeps showing structural stress fractures at 90 miles per hour. If I can't get this approved by the city council next week, the investors walk." He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "I need you to look at the dampening system. The fluid dynamics aren't working." Kane looked at the tablet. She felt a surge of nausea. He was doing it again, demanding she save his career while he actively planned to destroy her life. But she forced a smile, a tight, obedient smile. "I'll take a look, Roman," she said softly. "Good. Don't stay up too late. You look haggard when you're tired, and we have the fundraising gala on Friday. I need you presentable." He went upstairs to sleep. Kane went to work. She sat at the high-performance computer in the study, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in her eyes. The Skyline Tower was a beast of a building, a twisting, spiraling needle of glass and steel designed to pierce the clouds. The problem Roman was having was real. The wind at that altitude would cause the building to sway enough to make people seasick. Kane knew the solution. It required a tuned mass damper, a giant pendulum, suspended inside the top of the tower to counteract the movement. But it wasn't just about putting a heavy ball at the top. The geometry of the pendulum's housing had to be perfect. She began to code. This was her moment. This was the trap. She designed the damper housing. It was an intricate lattice of steel beams, complex and beautiful. To the naked eye, it looked like a standard structural support system. But Kane wasn't drawing random lines. She was using a technique known as parametric design scripting. She wrote a script that generated the coordinates of the steel joints based on a mathematical formula. And that formula wasn't random. If you took the XYZ coordinates of the 4,000 connection points in the damper housing and ran them through a simple decryption algorithm, they spelled out a sentence. It repeated over and over again, woven into the very skeleton of the building, designed by Kane Sterling. Property of Kane Sterling. She didn't stop there. In the metadata of the file, hidden deep within the object properties, where no architect ever looked, usually just reserved for software versioning numbers, she embedded a digital timestamp and her personal encryption key. She worked until 400 a.m. When she finished, The simulation ran perfectly. The tower held steady against 120 mph winds. It was a masterpiece of engineering. She saved the file. Then she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She left a sticky note on the screen, fixed the damper. It works now. E. The next morning, Roman came down, coffee in hand. He sat at the computer, ran the simulation, and watched the green lights of success flash across the screen. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even acknowledge her note. He simply saved the file to his portable drive, deleted her sticky note, and walked out the door, whistling. He had the golden ticket. The Skyline Tower was ready to be built, and now that he had the final design, he didn't need the architect anymore. Kane watched his car pull out of the driveway. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized. "Amelia," she said, her voice trembling. "He took the file. It's done. We need to be ready." The betrayal happened 3 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming match, no throwing of vases. It was cold, corporate, and brutal. Kane had just returned from the grocery store. She was carrying bags of vegetables, planning to make a stew. When she walked into the foyer, she saw 2 strangers standing there. One was a man in a cheap suit, holding a manila envelope. The other was a security guard she recognized from Roman's office building. Roman was standing by the fireplace, sipping a scotch. It was 2:00 p.m. "Roman!" Kane dropped the grocery bags. A carton of eggs cracked, oozing yellow onto the marble floor. "Who are these people?" Roman took a slow sip of his drink. He didn't look at her. He looked at the painting above the mantel. "Kane, this is Mr. Henderson. He's a process server. And you know Jerry from security." Process server. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew this was coming, but the reality of it hit her like a physical blow. "I'm filing for divorce, Kane." Roman said, his voice devoid of any emotion. It was his business voice. "Irreconcilable differences. I think we both know this marriage has been dead for years." "Dead?" Kane whispered. "I just saved your project 3 weeks ago." Roman finally looked at her. His eyes were cold, like shark eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're delusional, Kane. That's actually part of the reason. I can't deal with your mental instability anymore." He nodded to the man in the cheap suit. The man stepped forward and thrust the envelope into Kane's chest. She instinctively grabbed it. "You've been served," the man mumbled, "and Jerry is here to escort you out," Roman added casually. "Out?" Kane gasped. "This is my house." "Actually," Roman smirked. "According to the deed, it's the property of Sterling Holdings, LLC. And since you are not an employee or an officer of that company, you are trespassing. I've booked you a room at the Motel 6 on the highway for 3 nights. I'm feeling generous." "You can't do this," Kane said, her voice rising. "I have rights. You have a prenuptial agreement." Roman cut her off, his voice snapping like a whip. "You signed it, Kane. Unless you can prove you contributed significantly to the financial assets of the marriage, you leave with what you came with, which, if I recall, was a beat-up Honda Civic and some student debt. I paid off the debt. You can keep the Civic." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. The smell of expensive scotch and cologne was overpowering. "Don't fight this, Kane. My lawyers are the best in the city. If you try to come after my company, I will bury you in legal fees until you're homeless. Take the settlement, $10,000, and disappear. Go back to making coffee. It's what you were good at." He turned his back on her. "Jerry, remove her. If she resists, call the police. Kane didn't resist. She didn't scream. She looked at the back of the man she had loved for 15 years, the man she had built up from nothing. She felt a strange calm settle over her. It was the calm of a soldier who knows the enemy has just walked into a minefield. She allowed Jerry to guide her out into the rain. She didn't take the groceries. She got into her old Honda Civic, which Roman had graciously allowed her to keep parked in the driveway amidst his Ferraris and Porsches. She drove to the Motel 6. She sat on the lumpy bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. Then she opened the manila envelope. It was all there. The filing. The lies. The claim that she was a burden on his finances. She picked up her phone. "Amelia," she said, "he kicked me out? He offered me $10,000. On the other end of the line, Amelia Vance let out a low, dangerous hum. He just made the biggest mistake of his life. Get some sleep, Kane. Tomorrow we go to war. The discovery phase of Sterling v. Sterling was a bloodbath. Roman's lawyer Silas Thorne was a master of intimidation. He buried Amelia Vance in paperwork. He demanded bank records from 20 years ago. He demanded medical records, trying to prove Kane was mentally unstable. He scheduled depositions at inconvenient times, trying to force Kane to miss them, so he could file for a default judgment. But Kane showed up every time. She sat straight-backed, calm, and answered every question with a simple yes or no. The deposition of Roman Sterling was scheduled for a bleak morning in January. They met in the conference room of Thorne's high-rise office. The table was glass. The chairs were leather, and the view of the city was breathtaking. You could see the construction site of the Skyline Tower, in the distance, the cranes already moving. Roman sat at the head of the table looking bored. Thorne sat next to him, tapping a gold pen on a legal pad. Amelia Vance sat opposite them. She opened her laptop and connected it to the room's projector. "Mr. Sterling," Amelia began, "let's clarify the nature of your work. You claim to be the sole author of all designs produced by Sterling and Associates since 2010. "I am the lead architect," Roman said smoothly. "I have a team of juniors who handle the grunt work drafting basic CAD input. But the concepts, the engineering solutions, the intellectual property, that is 100% mine." "And your wife?" Amelia asked. "She never assisted, never offered a solution to a structural problem." Roman laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "My wife struggles to calculate the tip at a restaurant. She's a lovely woman, or she was, but her understanding of architecture is limited to knowing which houses look pretty in magazines. She has never worked on a file. She has never logged into our server. She doesn't even know the password." Amelia typed something into her laptop. "So if we were to look at the metadata of your project files, specifically the Skyline Tower project—" "We wouldn't find any trace of her," Thorne interjected, leaning forward. "Objection. Irrelevant. We have already provided the employee logs. Mrs. Sterling is not on them. This is a fishing expedition." "I'm just asking a question," Amelia said calmly. "Mr. Sterling, are you willing to state under oath that Kane Sterling has never touched the Skyline Tower files?" "I am," Roman said, staring directly at Kane. "She has never touched them." "Interesting," Amelia said. She pressed a key on her laptop. The projector screen behind Roman lit up. It showed a complex 3D wireframe of the Skyline Tower's upper damper system. "Do you recognize this structure, Mr. Sterling?" "Of course," Roman said, looking back at the screen. "That's the tuned mass damper housing. I designed it 3 months ago to solve the wind shear issue." "You designed it?" "Yes. in my home office. It came to me in a flash of inspiration." "A flash of inspiration," Amelia repeated. "And the mathematics required to generate this lattice structure. You did those calculations yourself." "I did." Roman lied without flinching. "It's a proprietary algorithm I wrote." "Can you explain the algorithm to us now?" Roman stiffened. "It's complex. I don't have my notes with me, but it involves fractal geometry and load distribution." "I see," Amelia said. "Well, that's very impressive, because we had a forensic digital analyst examine the file you submitted to the city planning office. The file you claimed was 100% yours." Thorne stopped tapping his pen. The air in the room shifted. He sensed a trap. "Ms. Vance," Thorne warned. "Where is this going?" "Mr. Sterling," Amelia continued, ignoring the lawyer. "Are you aware of what parametric steganography is?" Roman blinked. "No. It's a way of hiding information inside the geometry of a 3D model." Amelia explained, her voice hardening. "You see, this damper housing isn't just a random collection of beams. The position of every single node, all 4,000 of them, corresponds to a binary code." She hit another key. The image on the screen changed. The wireframe dissolved, and text began to scroll over the image, decoding the coordinates in real time. "Designed by Kane Sterling. Property of Kane Sterling. Designed by Kane Sterling. Property of Kane Sterling." The text repeated hundreds of times, filling the screen. Roman's face went pale. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. "And," Amelia added, driving the nail in, "if we look at the edit history, which you thought you wiped, we found a recover point. It shows the user admin home, which is the computer in your study, logged in at 3:15 a.m. on November the 14th. At that time, biometric keystroke analysis, which matches typing rhythm to a specific person, identifies the user not as you, Mr. Sterling. You hunt and peck. This user types at 110 words per minute, with a rhythmic variance consistent with a trained pianist. Kane plays the piano, doesn't she?" Thorne slammed his hand on the table. "This is inadmissible. You hacked his files." "We didn't hack anything," Amelia said, closing her laptop. "This information is publicly available. You submitted this file to the city planning department. It's a public record. We simply read it." Kane looked at Roman. He was no longer the confident billionaire. He was sweating. He looked at Thorne, panic in his eyes. "Silas," Roman croaked. Silas Thorne was pale. He began stuffing papers into his briefcase. "We're done for today. We need a recess." "We're not done," Amelia said, standing up. "We're just getting started. Because that was just the damper. We found signatures in the foundation of the Metro Museum. We found them in the Helix Bridge. We found them in every major project Sterling Associates has built in the last 10 years. Amelia leaned over the table, getting close to Roman's terrified face. "You didn't just steal her life, Roman. You stole her mind. And now she's taking it back. We'll see you in court." The settlement offer came the morning of the trial. Silas Thorne called Amelia Vance at 6 a.m. $2 million, Thorne said, his voice tight, and she signs a non-disclosure agreement. She never claims credit for the designs. She walks away today. Kane sat at Amelia's kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea. She heard the offer. $2 million was enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. It was safe. It was easy. "Tell him no," Kane said. Amelia smiled into the phone. "See you in court, Silas." By 9 a.m., the courtroom was packed. The rumors had spread. The architecture blogs, the local news, even a few national reporters were there. The story of the ghost architect had leaked likely thanks to Amelia's strategic maneuvering. Roman looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes. His perfect tan looked sallow. When he saw Kane, he didn't sneer. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated fear. Judge Harrison called the court to order. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, "you have filed a motion to suppress the evidence obtained from the digital files. You claim it is irrelevant. It is your honor." Thorne stood up, trying to regain his shark-like composure. "Even if Mrs. Sterling or someone using her login hid these digital watermarks in the files, it proves nothing about work. It proves she knows how to use a computer. It proves she vandalized company property. It does not prove she is an architect. It does not entitle her to half the firm." "Vandalism?" Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Yes, like a teenager scratching their name into a bathroom stall. That is not labor. That is graffiti." Amelia Vance stood up. "Your Honor, we would like to call our final witness, not an expert, not a character witness. We call Mr. Roman Sterling to the stand." Roman froze. He looked at Thorne, who gave a subtle shake of his head. But Roman had no choice. He walked to the stand, his legs stiff. "Mr. Sterling," Amelia began, pacing in front of him. "You claim the Skyline Tower is your magnum opus, your greatest work." "It is," Roman said, his voice raspy. "And the tuned mass damper, the complex lattice structure we discussed in the deposition that was your design. Yes." "Excellent." Amelia walked to a whiteboard set up in the corner of the courtroom. She picked up a black marker. She drew a complex curve, a specific section of the tower's upper geometry. "Mr. Sterling," she said, uncapping the marker, "there is a flaw in the wind load calculation for this specific curve. The city engineers flagged it yesterday. If the wind hits at a 45-degree angle, the torque increases by 20%. Can you please show the court right now on this board how you would adjust the calculus to compensate for that torque?" The room went dead silent. Roman stared at the whiteboard. He stared at the curve. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked at the judge. He looked at his lawyer. I would need my computer," Roman stammered. "I don't do mental math of this complexity." "It's not mental math," Amelia said softly. "It's the fundamental formula of the building you claim to have designed. If you built it, you know the load paths. Just write the equation, Mr. Sterling. Just the first line." Roman opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20, 30. It was agonizing. The great genius, the visionary, was staring at a line on a whiteboard like a first grader trying to read Shakespeare. I can't," he whispered. "Let the record show." Amelia said that the witness cannot derive the basic stability formula for his own building. She turned to the defense table. "Mrs. Sterling." Kane stood up. She didn't wait for permission. She walked to the whiteboard. She took the marker from Amelia's hand. She didn't hesitate. Her hand moved in a blur. She wrote out a differential equation that spanned 3 feet of the board. She added a derivation for the torque coefficient. She drew a correction to the curve, adjusting the angle by 1.5 degrees. The wind load is neutralized if you adjust the radial truss by a factor of P/4. Kane said, her voice ringing clear through the courtroom. She turned to the judge. "And it's not a flaw, Your Honor. The city engineers are using the standard static model. This building uses a dynamic response model. The torque doesn't break the building. The building leans into it. It's designed to dance, not to break." She capped the marker and set it down. Judge Harrison looked at the whiteboard. He looked at Roman, who was slumped in the witness chair, his face buried in his hands. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, you may step down. Actually, don't bother. I've seen enough." The judge turned his gaze to Silas Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, your client's claim that his wife contributed zero labor is not only false, it is perjury. It is fraudulent. And frankly, it is insulting to this court." Judge Harrison picked up the stack of files, the ones containing the printouts of the digital signatures Kane had hidden. "I see her signature here," the judge said, flipping a page. "And here, and here. In fact, Mr. Sterling, it appears the only thing you signed was the check to your tailor." The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. "The prenuptial agreement is hereby declared null and void due to fraudulent inducement. The assets of Sterling and Associates are to be frozen immediately pending a full forensic audit to determine the true value of Mrs. Sterling's contributions. And Mr. Sterling, I am referring this transcript to the district attorney's office. Perjury is a felony in this state." Roman didn't move. He just sat there, watching his empire turn to ash. The sound of the gavel striking the wood didn't just end the trial. It detonated Roman Sterling's life. For a moment, the courtroom was suspended in a vacuum of silence. Then chaos erupted. The reporters in the back row scrambled over one another to get to the aisle, their phones already pressed to their ears, dictating the headline that would ruin a legacy in seconds. "Sterling fraud exposed. Wife wrote the code. The billion-dollar fake." Roman sat frozen in the witness chair. His face was a mask of grey shock. He looked at his hands. The hands that had shaken presidents' hands. The hands that had cut ribbons on billion-dollar bridges, and realized they were trembling uncontrollably. He looked toward his lawyer, Silas Thorne, expecting a strategy, a loophole, a reassuring nod. But Silas Thorne was already packing his briefcase. The shark sensed blood in the water, and he knew when a carcass was picked clean. "Silas," Roman croaked, his voice cracking. "What do we do? We appeal, right? She tricked the court with that whiteboard stunt." Thorne didn't even look up as he snapped the latches of his leather case. "There is no appeal for perjury, Roman. You lied under oath. The judge has already referred you to the district attorney. I'm not your lawyer anymore. I'm a witness. You can't leave me." Roman stood up, his legs wobbling. "I pay you a retainer of $50,000 a month." Thorne finally looked at him, his eyes cold and hard. "Your assets are frozen, Mr. Sterling. You don't pay me anything. And frankly, I don't represent criminals who are stupid enough to get caught by their own wives." Thorne walked out, pushing past the bailiff. Across the room, Amelia Vance was hugging Kane. It wasn't a polite, lawyerly handshake. It was a fierce embrace. Kane felt the tension of 15 years leave her body. She didn't cry. She felt a strange, light-headed clarity, like she had just surfaced from a deep, dark ocean. "It's over," Amelia whispered. "Not yet," Kane said, pulling back. She turned to look at Roman. He was standing alone near the defense table. The room was emptying, but the air between them crackled with unspoken history. He looked small. The bespoke Italian suit suddenly looked like a costume on a child. He caught her eye. For a fleeting second, Kane thought she might see remorse. Instead, she saw a flash of the old arrogance, desperate and cornered. "You ruined us," Roman hissed across the aisle, loud enough for the lingering clerks to hear. "You happy you burned down the company? The Skyline Tower? The investors will pull out. You didn't win, Kane. You just ensured we both end up with nothing." Kane walked toward him. The bailiff stepped forward to intercept, but she held up a hand. She stopped 3 feet from him. "I didn't burn down the company, Roman," she said, her voice steady and low. "I burned down the lie, the company. The company was never yours. It was the work, and the work survives." She turned her heel and walked out the double doors. The hallway was blinded by camera flashes. For the first time in her life, Kane didn't look down. She looked straight into the lens. The true depth of Roman's fall didn't happen overnight. It happened in the agonizing slow-motion crawl of the forensic audit ordered by the court. 2 weeks after the verdict, Kane sat in a conference room with a team of forensic accountants. The lead auditor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Gowers, slid a thick binder across the table. "Mrs. Sterling," Gowers said, "we were looking for the value of your intellectual property. We found that. But we also found discrepancies." Kane frowned. "Discrepancies?" "Roman was desperate," Amelia explained, flipping open the binder. "He knew he couldn't do the work himself, so he was bleeding cash to hide it. He was paying exorbitant consulting fees to shell companies in the Caymans. But that's not the worst part." Gowers pointed to a column of red numbers. "The Skyline Tower. The materials budget." Kane scanned the numbers. Her blood ran cold. "He switched the steel specs," she whispered. High-tensile alloy was in the design. He ordered standard grade. "He pocketed the difference," Gowers nodded grimly. "About $4 million. He skimmed it off the top to pay for his gambling debts and the lifestyle maintenance." Kane felt sick. It wasn't just fraud. It was endangerment. Standard-grade steel at that altitude, with the wind shear she had calculated. The tower wouldn't just sway, it would have sheared off in a hurricane. If that building had been finished with those materials, Kane said, her voice shaking, people would have died. He was gambling with lives to pay for his ego, Amelia said. This was the final nail. The perjury charge was bad, but construction fraud and endangerment. That was prison time. Serious prison time. Kane closed the binder. "Release it," she said. "Release all of it to the district attorney and send a stop work order to the construction site immediately. We have to tear out the frame and start over." "That will cost millions," Gowers warned. "It will eat into your settlement." "I don't care," Kane said fiercely. "My name is on the hidden code of that building. I won't let my name be on a tombstone." 3 months later, the dismantling of Roman Sterling was complete. His assets were seized. The mansion was foreclosed. The Ferraris were auctioned off to pay the fines and the retrofitting costs for the tower. Kane was living in a modest apartment downtown close to the office she was setting up. It was late raining hard, typical Seattle weather. She was leaving her new office building when she saw a figure standing under the awning of the bus stop across the street. It was Roman. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost 30 pounds. His hair, usually dyed a perfect silver fox, was growing out in patchy grey and white. He wore a raincoat that looked 2 sizes too big. He wasn't the master of the universe anymore. He was a man waiting for a bus. He saw her. He stepped out into the rain. Kane's hand tightened on her umbrella. She debated walking to her car, ignoring him. But she knew she needed this last moment. She stopped. Roman walked over water dripping from his nose. He smelled of cheap whiskey and rain. "They're indicting me on Tuesday," he said. No hello, no preamble. "The steel. They found the steel orders." "I know," Kane said. "I gave them the files." Roman let out a bitter, wet laugh. "Of course you did. You really wanted to see me destroyed, didn't you? Was it worth it just to prove you were smart?" "It wasn't about being smart, Roman," she said. "It was about being real. You were going to let people live in a death trap, just so you could buy another boat. I had it under control, he shouted, his voice cracking. A passerby glanced at them nervously. I would have fixed it later. I always fix it. I just needed time. You never fixed anything. Kane snapped, her voice rising over the sound of the rain. I fixed it. For 15 years, I fixed the math. I fixed the designs. I fixed your reputation. I fixed the cracks in your ego every single night while you slept. And you thanked me by trying to erase me. Roman wiped his face. He looked exhausted. The fight drained out of him. I made you Kane. You were a barista. I gave you a life. No. Kane shook her head, her eyes sad. You gave me a job I didn't apply for and didn't get paid for. I made myself Roman. And the sad part is, if you had just been honest, if you had just said we instead of I would have stayed. I would have helped you. We could have been great. Roman looked at her, and for the first time the reality of his loss truly hit him. He saw the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had tried to discard like a used napkin. She was radiant even in the rain. She was strong, and she was completely out of his reach. I have nothing, he whispered. No money, no friends, no legacy. You have the truth now, Kane said. Start there. She turned and walked to her car. She didn't look back to see if he got on the bus. It wasn't her problem anymore. The public auction of the Sterling estate was the social event of the season, though, for macabre reasons. The wealthy vultures of the city descended to pick the bones of the fallen idol. Kane attended for one reason only. The auctioneer, a brisk man with a British accent, stood on a podium in what used to be her living room. Lot 405, he announced. An antique drafting table, mahogany, mid-20th century, signs of heavy use. The crowd murmured. It wasn't a flashy item. It was scarred, stained with ink, and wobbled slightly. Roman had kept it in the garage, piling boxes on it. He had called it junk. But Kane knew what it was. It was her father's table. The one thing she had brought into the marriage. The table where she had taught herself geometry after her parents died. The table where she had secretly designed the Metro Museum while Roman was out partying. Opening bid at $200, the auctioneer said. 500 who? A dealer in the back shouted. 1,000, Kane said, lifting her paddle. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room. That's her. That's the ex-wife. 1,000 from the lady in the front, the auctioneer said. 2,000, a spiteful-looking man in a flashy suit called out. He was one of Roman's old drinking buddies. He grinned at Kane, trying to intimidate her. Kane didn't blink. She raised her paddle. 10,000. The room gasped. For a drafting table worth maybe $300. The man in the suit stopped grinning. He lowered his paddle. He wasn't going to fight a woman who had just taken down a billionaire. Sold. The auctioneer slammed the hammer. To Mrs. Sterling. Kane walked up, placed her hand on the scarred wood of the table, and smiled. It was the only thing in this house that had ever been real, and now it was going home. 6 months later. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the firm of Sterling and Vance was not a gala. There were no champagne fountains or ice sculptures. It was an open house held in a renovated industrial loft in the Arts District. The walls were brick, the windows were huge, and the light was perfect. The room was filled not just with wealthy investors, but with students, engineers, and young architects, especially women, who looked at Kane with something approaching reverence. Kane stood by the refreshments, talking to a young girl who was clutching a sketchbook. "I read about the code," the girl said shyly. "How you hid your name in the damper. Is it true?" "It's true." Kane smiled. "I started coding because of you," the girl said. "I thought architecture was just drawing, but you showed me it's math and poetry mixed together." Kane felt a lump in her throat. This was the legacy Roman had wanted, but could never buy. Influence, inspiration. Amelia Vance tapped a spoon against a glass. The room quieted. "Brief speech," Amelia announced. "Then we get back to work." The crowd laughed. "A year ago," Amelia said, putting an arm around Kane's shoulder. "This firm was just a file on a USB drive in a pocket. Today we have 5 major contracts, including the city's new green energy library. But more importantly, we have a philosophy. We don't build monuments to our egos. We build shelters for the future." Amelia raised her glass. "To the architect." "To the architect," the room echoed. Kane looked around the room. She saw her team, a diverse group of brilliant minds she had hand-picked. She saw the blueprints spread out on the tables, honest, safe, innovative designs. She thought about the Skyline Tower. The retrofitting was complete. The Sterling and Associates sign had been taken down. It was now just the skyline. And at the very top, inside the steel housing of the damper, hidden from the world, but holding the whole thing steady, was her name. It would be there for 100 years. Long after the scandal faded, long after Roman was forgotten, the building would stand because she had done the math. She took a sip of her drink. It tasted like victory. 1 year later, a letter arrived at Kane's office. The return address was a correctional facility in upstate New York. She debated throwing it away. But curiosity, that old architect's trait, won out. She opened it. The handwriting was shaky, stripped of its old flamboyant loops. "Kane, I have a lot of time to think in here. I work in the prison library. I fix the wobbly tables. I organize the shelves. It's quiet. I saw the article in Architectural Digest about the library project. The cantilever design is brilliant. I tried to figure out how you supported the weight of the glass roof. I couldn't do it. I sat with a pencil for 3 days, and I couldn't solve it. I realized something. I never could. You were always the light. I was just the prism that claimed to make the colors. I'm sorry." Emsua Kane folded the letter. She didn't write back. She didn't need to. She placed the letter in the shredder and watched it turn into confetti. She turned back to her drafting table, the old, scarred mahogany table she had bought back. She picked up her pencil. She had a bridge to design. In the end, Roman Sterling learned the hard way that you can steal someone's credit. You can steal their time, and you can even try to steal their dignity, but you can never steal their genius. Kane didn't just win a lawsuit. She reclaimed her identity. She proved that while the face of success might be loud and charismatic, the spine of success is often quiet, diligent, and standing right in the shadow, holding everything up. So the next time you see a towering skyscraper or a beautiful bridge, ask yourself whose name is on the plaque and whose spirit is actually in the steel. Because sometimes the real architect is the one you never saw coming. Do you think Roman got what he deserved? Or should the punishment have been even harsher? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.